working in the service industry, you got to deal with some weird people. And I'm not even talking about the customers, because if a customer's a weirdo, but he tips well, I don't care. If a customer's a weirdo and he doesn't tip well, on the other hand, I'm going to have to see him out back and spin his jaw around real quick. But what I want to talk about is the freakazoids that get hired at my establishment of work. Now, I work in the food service industry at a fine dining steakhouse. I make a lot of brie, as you guys know. But that's besides the point. I just wanted to throw that in there. Just a little humble brag for you guys, maybe to give you some motivation in your own occupation to get your money up and not your funny up. But but what I was saying is sometimes you deal with freaks that get hired. And when I first started working at this establishment, I was bussing tables. I wasn't serving customers like how I am now. I'm a server now. But before, when I started out, I was in the depths, in the trenches of the restaurant, taking bus buckets from the bar, handling dirty dishes, bringing bread to tables, taking out the laundry to the back, throwing out the trash in the bin. I was just the workhorse of the establishment when I was bussing tables. And when I first got there, the servers were taking real advantage of me, and I didn't know no better. It was my first job. I was bussing tables, so I was just taking orders and doing whatever they said. Now, I wanted to give you guys a case study on one of the dudes that I worked with when I first got to this establishment. Basically, what happened is he got fired. I'm just going to give you the end of the story now. He got fired, and after he got fired, it involved him putting a knife to his throat. And I'm going to explain that. But first, I'm going to give you the whole case study, and we're going to wrap the whole thing around and get to the point where he's tried to stab himself in the throat. So, to start off, I get there. It's my first day on the job, and I'm working with this guy named Kenny. Now, case study on Kenny. He's about 5'6", about 60 years old, and he's just a certified Boston motherfucker. Now, what do I mean by that? If you don't live in Boston, you don't know. Basically, this guy, he talks like this, like, "What's up? My name's Kenny. I'm from Boston. I just brought my car here. I have a 95 Toyota Corolla, and I just bought it to work. It's my car. I just parked it in the yard outside." That's how he talks. He had a shamrock tattoo on his calf, and if you know anything about Boston individuals, you know that 1 out of every 5 Boston individuals has either a shamrock tattoo on their calf or the logo of the Bruins on their calf. And I'm not hating, but me personally, I'm not putting anything on my calves. Why would I cover up these absolute pythons that I got? You see the fucking swoop on my calf? The lighting's bad here, but I'm not covering this up with a shamrock, if you know what I'm saying. But anyway, he had this gray hair. He had like a low top fade, like he was just going into the military. What else can we describe this guy by? He was almost too old to even serve. Watching him carry drinks to tables, it made me feel bad for the guy. The dude was fossilizing as he was moving. His pants were always hanging off his ass because his belt was never tight enough. He was probably a cocaine head. I mean, he had bloodshot eyes 95% of the time I worked with him. He was a raging alcoholic. He would fall down in the middle of shifts because he was just absolutely sloshed out of his gourd. So that's the kind of guy we're dealing with. We're dealing with a cokehead, alcoholic, Bostonian motherfucker. And on top of everything, the worst of all, he's got a shamrock tattoo on his calf. Basically, he wouldn't be busy, and he would be asking me to do shit for him when realistically the only time he should have been speaking to me is when he was on his hands and knees and getting brutalized on the floor of the establishment in the dining room, just had way too many tables, were just in the weeds. That's when you come to the busser and have him bring bread and water to your table. So one day he was like, "Hey, Matt, go bring bread and water to my table." And then he just sat in the back on his phone. So instead of bringing the bread and water to his table, I just simply said the word no, because I wasn't fucking with Kenny at this point in time, because I had already been working with him for a few weeks. And I had noticed he was one of the servers who was taking advantage of me as a busser, taking advantage of my impeccable work ethic. I told his ass no. I said, "No, I'm not doing that shit." And then he goes, "Oh, what am I paying you for if you don't even do what I say?" You don't understand. They're lucky I was making $800 a week bussing tables, because if I wasn't drowning in breach and saving up for a GR86, which I then sold 2 years later, if I wasn't doing that, I would have smacked him in the fucking face right in front of everybody. Right in front of Megan, right in front of Mike the server, right in front of fucking Candy, right in front of Chef Robert. I would have smacked him in front of everyone and got fired. But they're lucky I was making a goddamn fortune every week at that establishment, busting tables. But I was like, "Nah, I'm not bringing bread to your table." He said, "What am I paying you for? Get out of my restaurant." He said, "Get out of my restaurant." Dude, you're a server at the establishment. You don't fucking own it. It's not your restaurant. But he said that, and people laughed at him. So that was pretty embarrassing for him. But basically, he was getting too drunk before shifts and just falling down and all that bullshit. There was one time where he was carrying a tray full of glassware, and he must have had 35 Jack and Cokes before coming into the shift that day because his breath smelled. He was slurring his words. I don't even know how he was communicating with tables. But he came in with that tray full of glass, dropped it all over the floor. It was the loudest noise you could have ever heard in your fucking life. It sounded like Godzilla was shooting a nuclear pulse through the earth to channel King Kong from the center of the earth. Yes, that's an actual plot from a movie. I know it sounds dumb. But when Godzilla and King Kong are involved in a movie, when isn't it fucking stupid? But that's besides the point. I got a little sidetracked there. Basically, he dropped all the glassware in the middle of the fucking kitchen. It was the loudest thing ever. The whole dining room came to a fucking halt because they were like, did a fucking bomb just go off in the kitchen? Did Hiroshima 2.0 just happen in the kitchen? Why does it sound like 35 pots and pans just got knocked off the wall and careened into the floor at 35 kilometers an hour? So he got fired for that because he broke about $350,000 worth of glassware, because that's how expensive shit is at these fine dining establishments. Each wine glass is like 14 bills, 14 big ones. So he broke so much glassware that the manager was just like, Kenny, you got to get the fuck out of here. You're fired. So Kenny leaves, stumbling out the door because he's drunk as a motherfucker. But this is where the story really starts to heat up. I'm in the next day. I'm opening. I'm in at 3:30. I'm like adjusting the silverware on the tables like a fucking menace, making sure all the napkin folds are set in the right place, making sure every table's got wine glasses, because I don't fuck around when I work. And when I do an occupation, I do it the right way and I make sure everything's spick and span. So I'm, polishing the silverware, making it all straight and good and whatever. The restaurant opens at 4. It's about 3:45. I'm bussing, and then I got a server there named John, and short little 20-second case study on John. He's got a tattoo on the back of his head that says "Hard to Kill" in bold Times New Roman font. So that should tell you all you need to know about this guy John that I'm working with. So John's opening as a server. He's like cutting the lemons and shit, making sure that the ice tray is stocked full of ice, brewing the coffee and tea, all that bullshit that servers have to do when they open. And all of a sudden, Kenny comes in at the side door, and he's like knocking on it because the door's not open yet because it's locked because we haven't opened yet. But I'm like, let me open the door for Kenny. I really don't like the guy, but he just got fired yesterday. So I want to see what happens when I let him in. I want to see the chaos that unfolds. So I was kind of instigating a little bit because I could have just left his ass outside in the cold and let him fucking freeze to death. But I'm a nice guy, so I let him in. He comes in, walks right past me, doesn't even say thank you to me, God forbid. I almost fucking put my fist into the back of his head and sent his head careening across the dining room floor underneath table 35. But I didn't, I held back. I'm really good at holding myself back from physically harming people. But basically, he goes in there, and John's coming into the dining room trying to see what's up with Kenny because he hears Kenny yelling because the dude started yelling. He's like, you want to fire me? You're going to see what happens. So then John comes out, the guy that has Hard to Kill in the back of his head. He's like, Kenny, what's going on? Get out of here. You're not supposed to be here right now. I'm sure the manager doesn't want to see you. This dude, Kenny, picks up one of the steak knives from the table that I just polished and set perfectly in place. So I was pissed that he took the knife off the table, first of all. So disrespectful to me. He's lucky, once again, that I didn't snap both of his fucking legs off of his body and break his femurs and shove him down his fucking throat. He's lucky I didn't do that. But he takes the knife off the table, a steak knife. It's serrated. It's sharp. It's meant for cutting thick cuts of meat. Pause. And he gives it to John. He gets on his knees, looks up at John. The guy that has Hard to Kill tattooed on the back of his head, that's John. Kenny gives the knife to John, and he puts it in his hands, grabs John's hands, and says, kill me. Please kill me right now. I want you to slit my throat and kill me and put me out of my misery because I can't live without this job. He's telling John, the guy that says Hard to Kill on the back of his head, to slit his throat in the middle of the dining room in front of absolutely nobody. Now, his game plan was all fucked up from jump, because if it's me and I want my throat to get slit in the dining room, I want it to be in front of a loaded dining room on a busy Saturday night. I want to come in there on a Saturday night through the door, start yelling, cause a scene so everyone's looking at me. Tell John to come over here. I'm not grabbing a serrated knife. I'm grabbing a butcher's knife from the kitchen, giving it to John, and I'm telling him to hack my fucking head off. Because that's a good way to go. You don't die in front of nobody in the middle of a Ruth's Chris where it doesn't matter. You want your death to have meaning. So he did it all fucked up from the beginning. But needless to say, John didn't slit his throat because he had a shift to do. He had money to make, so he wasn't about to go to jail for first-degree murder. So Kenny was like begging him. Like, I've never seen something like this before. He was begging the dude to slit his throat. It was, I'm not going to lie, borderline comical because Kenny was sloshed out of his gourd again. He was drunk out of his fucking face. So I don't even think he was meaning what he was saying, but John didn't slit his throat. He got escorted. Kenny got escorted off the premises and thrown out the door. It's like that scene from Casino where Robert De Niro's like, "I want you to escort him off the premises and use his fucking head to open the door."
I want you to exit this guy off the premises, and I want you to exit him off his feet and use his head to open the fucking door.
That's what it looked like when the manager threw him out. He like used his body to Kenny's body to open the door, and it was a whole thing. And Kenny never came back. And I hadn't heard from Kenny in like a year and a half maybe. And then some guy gets hired to our job named Dennis, and he works at Smith and Walensky, which is like an even more upscale steakhouse than I work at. And we were talking about Kenny, and usually when we get new hires, we shoot the shit and we tell the Kenny story to people where he got on his knees and told John to slit his throat with a steak knife next to table 58. So, because it's always just a funny story to tell. And Dennis is like, "Are you talking about Kenny, like the old guy? He's got the tattoo on his calf," and he's like describing Kenny to a T. Dude, Kenny got fired from my steakhouse, threatened to have someone kill him in the middle of the dining room after he got fired, and then left, and then got hired to an even better steakhouse, and then got fired 2 weeks later. So this guy's life's a mess, but that's the Kenny story. That's the throat slitting story, and that's all I got for you guys.